My apartment smelled like vanilla frosting and fresh paper, all wedding stuff and fake calm. My phone buzzed on the counter. I reached for my coffee, and my engagement ring flashed in the light. Then James's laptop lit up on the coffee table. One email preview slid down like a blade. Subject: Final payment. I clicked without thinking. The screen filled with 2 lines that didn't even try to sound kind. She deserves a better life. Her family has the network. My hand clenched around my ring until it bit my skin. And then I saw the transfer memo. For Mia, keep it clean. I didn't make a sound. I just sat there, realizing someone had put a price on my life. The week before my wedding, my apartment in Chicago looked like a Pinterest board that had been forced to grow up and get a job. There was a stack of ivory invitations on my kitchen counter, next to a half-eaten box of lemon bars. And my fridge was basically a bulletin board of panic. Call florist. Church schedule 4 p.m. Confirm catering. The only romantic thing about any of it was the smell, honestly. Vanilla frosting and fresh paper. That and the way my engagement ring kept catching the light every time I reached for my coffee, like it was trying to remind me it existed. People always called me boring, like it was some tragic personality flaw, and not, stability. Like I should apologize for paying my rent on time and owning matching towels. I got it my whole life. Sometimes as a joke, sometimes as a dig. James did it too. But he said it with that half smile, like it was supposed to be cute. He'd go, "You're just steady, Claire. Dependable, boring." And I'd roll my eyes like, "Congrats, you found the one woman on earth who enjoys a calendar." But dependable, boring was me. I worked hard. I showed up. I handled the unsexy parts of life without needing applause for it. And in my head, marriage was supposed to be the same thing. 2 people showing up, even when it wasn't glamorous. My bedroom looked like a staging area. My dress hung in the closet on a padded hanger, zipped up in its garment bag like it was in protective custody. Every time I opened the closet, the fabric brushed my shoulder and made that soft, whispery sound, like a secret trying to get my attention. My shoes were still in their box on the top shelf, with the tissue paper crisp and folded like it had manners. Under the bed, the little velvet ring box sat there like it had somewhere important to be. If you took a photo, it all looked calm. It all looked right, like I was living the dream. But real life isn't a photo. Real life has audio. It has the buzz of your phone on the counter at 6:12 a.m. It has the hum of the heater turning on, then off, then on again like it couldn't commit. It has the way someone clears their throat before answering, like the truth needs warming up first. My mom, Linda, called every morning that week, like it was her job. She said, "People will talk," the way other moms said, "I love you." Same tone, same urgency. People will talk if the seating chart looks petty. People will talk if the dessert table looks cheap. People will talk if anything looks less than perfect. She didn't do chaos. She did control wrapped in sweetness. Like if she smoothed the surface hard enough, no one would notice the water underneath was moving. And then there was Mia, my cousin, my walking highlight filter. She didn't call, she FaceTimed, because apparently phone calls without a camera don't exist in her world. Her face would fill my screen perfectly lit, glossy lips, flawless brows, and behind her, there was always some bright white kitchen situation with marble and a ring light reflection in the cabinet glass. She talked like she was already captioning it. Babe, obsessed, literally dying, timeless. People love timeless. People, people, people. Like the whole world was watching and scoring. She even showed me custom cookies decorated like miniature wedding invitations. My name and icing next to James's. Perfect and cute in a way that felt a little too much. And the whole time she smiled like she was doing me a favor just by existing. After I hung up, I went back to my checklist because that's what I do. Organize. Control what I can control. James came into the kitchen, kissed the side of my head, and his cologne hit a second later. Clean and expensive. The kind of scent you wear when you want everyone to think your life is fine. He asked if I was okay, and I said, yeah, just wedding brain. And he nodded like he was relieved I didn't ask anything back. Then he said we're doing the right thing. But he said it like he was reminding himself. Later that day, my dad Richard stopped by like he was inspecting a construction site. No flowers, no warmth, His coat smelled like cold air and faint aftershave, and his eyes flicked over the invitations, the dress bag peeking from my closet, the ring on my finger like he was tallying assets. He asked if everything was on schedule.
I said, yeah, pretty much.
He said good. That was it. He didn't waste words. He used them like tools. My mom came in behind him carrying a white bakery box like dessert was fragile and reputations were made of sugar. She smiled while she talked, sweet and firm at the same time, like she was helping, like she wasn't quietly directing a performance. And somewhere in all that normal, in all that everything's fine, I felt this tiny crack I couldn't explain. James kept avoiding my dad's eyes. Not dramatically, just consistently, like there was a line on the floor he didn't want to cross. My dad didn't seem bothered at all. If anything, he looked satisfied. Quiet and certain, like he already knew how this story would go. I told myself I was overthinking, that I was stressed, that it was just too much frosting and not enough sleep, until James's phone buzzed on the couch and he snatched it up so fast it looked like a reflex. And in the glow of the screen, I caught one quick preview at the top of his inbox. Final payment. James's phone was already back in his hand after that little buzz, and I watched him do this tiny thing that didn't match the moment. He didn't just pick it up, he grabbed it. Like it wasn't a notification, it was a threat. He smiled at me a second later. Too quick, too polished, and I could tell he wanted to move on from whatever had flashed on his screen. A few minutes after my parents left, the apartment settled into that fake quiet it gets when company's gone. The fridge clicked on with a low hum. The heater made that soft ticking sound like it was trying to start a conversation I didn't want. James hovered in the kitchen, wiping a counter that was already clean, opening cabinets he didn't need, acting productive the way people act when they're nervous. Then he said he had to grab something from the car, something about church paperwork, and he was out the door before I could even answer. The lock clicked behind him, and suddenly it was just me, the invitations, the lemon bars, and the glow of his laptop sitting half open on my coffee table. I wasn't snooping. I didn't have some dramatic plan. I needed the address list because we were literally out of stamps, and James had typed it up to help. So I sat down, flipped the laptop open, and the screen brightened like a spotlight. The keyboard was still warm. There was that faint, hot electronic smell mixed with vanilla frosting and coffee, like normal life trying to keep going. The spreadsheet popped up first. Names, addresses, little notes. Boring. Safe. And then a small email notification slid into the corner, with a soft little ding that made my stomach go still. Sender, Richard. Subject line, final payment. My finger hovered for half a second, and then it clicked. Like my body did it before my brain could argue. The email opened clean and bright, and my eyes went straight to the lines that felt like getting hit with ice water. She deserves a better life. Her family has the network. I read them once, then again, because part of me kept expecting the words to rearrange into something less ugly. They didn't. Underneath was an attachment preview, a transfer confirmation, neat and official, and my vision tunneled on the memo line like it was the only thing in the world. For Mia, keep it clean. Clean. That word again. Sweetly delivered. Weaponized. My eyes burned. Not the pretty kind of crying, just this hot pressure behind them. When I blinked, my lashes stuck for a second. My engagement ring suddenly felt like it weighed 10 pounds. I curled my hand around it without thinking, gripping so hard the metal pressed into my skin. I could actually feel the edge of it bite, leaving that pale indent that turned pink as my fingers tightened. My hand was shaking, but my face didn't move. I didn't scream. I didn't throw the laptop. I didn't do any of the things people expect when they picture betrayal. I just sat there, staring at that subject line. Final payment. Like it was a receipt for my life. The fridge hummed. A car honked outside. Somewhere upstairs, someone laughed. The world stayed normal, and that almost made it worse. The front door handle jiggled. Keys. James was coming back. I clicked out of the email fast. Not panicked, just precise, like I was putting a blade back in its sheath. The spreadsheet reappeared. My hand slid off the mouse, and I forced my fingers to relax. even though my ring had left a mark that felt like proof. James walked in, cheeks pink from the cold, and his eyes went straight to the laptop for half a second before he tried to make them casual. He asked if I'd been on it, and I told him, yeah, just the address list. We're out of stamps. I watched his shoulders drop, like he'd been holding his breath. I watched him nod too quickly. I watched him talk about nothing, and I stayed quiet. Not because I forgave anything, because in that moment, I understood something very clearly. If I made a scene, it would help them. It would give them mess to blame and emotions to dismiss. So I smiled once, small and polite, like my mom taught me, and I decided the coldest thing I could do. I was going to act normal and disappear on my own terms. 2 nights later, James asked if we could talk, which is basically the verbal equivalent of a toe tag. He picked this quiet restaurant in Chicago with warm yellow lighting and those high booths that make you feel like you're in a private bubble, like the world can't see you falling apart. The place smelled like garlic butter and lemon cleaner, and the air conditioning hummed steady overhead like it was trying to smooth everything out. He ordered a glass of red wine he barely touched. I got water. The ice clinked when the server set it down, and that tiny sound felt weirdly loud, like my body was turning up the volume on details because it didn't want to hear what was coming. James sat across from me and did this whole performance before he even spoke. He took a deep breath like he was about to dive underwater. He looked around the room, not at people, just scanning, like he didn't want witnesses. Then he put his phone face down on the table, slow and deliberate, like that meant he was being honest. His fingers started tapping the tabletop in a steady little rhythm, and I recognized it immediately. That was his tell. That was what he did when he wanted to keep something clean. He started, "So, I've been thinking." And I watched his mouth shape the next sentence like he was trying to make it sound reasonable, practical, soft, blameless. I didn't let him. I leaned back in the booth, looked at him straight, and I said, "I get it. We're headed in different directions." Not dramatic, not angry, just flat, like I was reading the weather. For a second, his face did something I'll never forget. Relief flashed first, quick and guilty, like he'd been waiting for me to make it easy. And then panic, because he didn't expect me to take control of the ending. He tried to push back, like, "No, it's not like that. I care about you. This is complicated." But the words sounded thin. He was building a story he could live with. I reached for my ring. The metal felt cold against my skin as I twisted it. And then I slid it off slowly, like I was taking off something that didn't belong to me anymore. I placed it on the table between us. It didn't clatter, it just made this soft little tick against the wood. And suddenly, it was the loudest thing in the room. The ring on the table, his red wine beside it, my empty hand. His eyes locked on that circle, like it was a problem he didn't know how to solve. I said, "Keep it, sell it, whatever." And I meant it. Not because I didn't care, but because I refused to beg for something that had already been sold. James opened his mouth, closed it, and his eyes flicked down to his glass like it could hide him. He didn't say the real reason. He couldn't. He just kept circling words like realistic and responsible and practical, like he was trying to convince himself he wasn't doing something cruel. I stood up first. The booth made that soft suction sound as I slid out, and for a second, it looked like my seat was still holding the shape of me, a little ghost of a life I'd almost had. I left the ring there. I left him there, and I walked out calm, steady, like I was just going to the restroom and not cutting my future in half. I didn't cry in the car. I didn't cry in the elevator. I waited until my apartment door closed behind me, and then my knees just gave. I slid down against the wood, the silence rushing in, my eyes burning, and it finally cracked open. Not a movie sob, just this quiet, shaking release into my sleeve, like my body had been storing it and ran out of space. When it stopped, I wiped my face, stared at the pale indent on my ring finger, and I promised myself something I wasn't going to negotiate on ever again. No one gets to put a price on me again. And as I sat there in the dark, I already knew the next step wasn't a fight. It was leaving. The morning after that restaurant, I went to work like nothing happened. I showed up with puffy eyes and a normal outfit, and the same calm face I'd perfected over years of being the stable one. Fluorescent lights buzzed above me. The office coffee tasted burnt like it always did, and someone asked how wedding planning was going with this cheerful little grin like they were rooting for a rom-com. I smiled back and said it was busy. That was my superpower back then, honestly. I could put a whole disaster inside one harmless word. A couple weeks later, the thing that saved me didn't look dramatic at all. It was an email. A relocation offer tied to a project expansion. The subject line wasn't poetic. It was something boring and corporate, the kind of thing you usually skim. But when I opened it, my chest got quiet in this weird, steady way. Like my body recognized a door. It was real. A bigger project, a different city, and a timeline that didn't give me room to sit in my feelings and rot. They needed someone reliable, someone who could keep their head down, handle pressure, and not fall apart when a plan changed overnight. I read it twice, printed it out, and the printer spit out warm paper that smelled faintly like toner. Like proof you could hold in your hands. I stared at my name on the offer and realized something I hadn't let myself say out loud yet. No one in my family had to approve my exit. I accepted that same day. The weeks after were a blur of cardboard and packing tape. My apartment filled with boxes, and the sharp plastic smell of tape stuck to my fingers. Bubble wrap popped under my palms like tiny, petty fireworks. I took down the wedding checklist from my fridge, one magnet at a time, and it felt like pulling out splinters. The invitations went into a drawer. The dress stayed in its garment bag until I couldn't stand seeing it anymore, and then it disappeared into the back of my closet, like a ghost I wasn't ready to deal with. My mom tried calling. Of course she did. Her messages came in sweet and tight, like frosting hiding a knife. She didn't ask how I was. She asked what I was doing. She asked what I was telling people. She asked if I understood what this looked like. People will talk, Claire. People will talk. Like my pain was a publicity problem. My dad's texts were worse because they were shorter. Cole, we need to discuss. As if my life was a meeting he could schedule. I didn't answer either of them. Not out of spite. Out of survival. James reached out once, maybe twice, with those careful sentences that sound responsible on paper. Hope you're doing well. I think this is for the best. I want things to stay respectful. It was the same tone he used at the restaurant, like he was trying to keep everything neat enough that he could still sleep at night. I deleted his messages without replying. I didn't block him. I didn't need the drama of a block. I just let the silence sit there. Cold and final. Mia, predictably, didn't text like a normal person. She posted. A lot. Photos, stories, smiles. The kind of content that's always one filter away from a lie. I didn't watch them. I didn't need to. I knew the vibe. Perfect life, perfect angle, perfect timing. Anything to make it look like I was a chapter she'd outgrown, not someone she'd helped erase. The only person I couldn't fully cut off was Daniel. Daniel would call it weird times, cautious, like he was walking across thin ice. He'd ask how I was doing, but he'd also ask if I was okay, like those were two different questions. Sometimes he'd start to say something about mom or dad and then swallow it down, like he didn't want to make me choose between my sanity and his loyalty. I didn't make him choose. I told him I loved him. I told him I was working. I told him I needed space. He didn't argue. That's the thing about Daniel. He always wanted peace, but he wasn't cruel about it. He was just soft, in a family that used softness like a weakness. The day I left Chicago, it was cold enough that the air stung my nose. The airport smelled like coffee and floor cleaner, and that faint jet fuel tang that always makes everything feel urgent. Wheels of suitcases rattled over the tile in every direction, and overhead a speaker crackled with boarding announcements. Half human, half machine. I held my boarding pass between my fingers, like it was a permission slip to become someone else. My phone buzzed in my coat pocket. Mom. Then Dad. Then Mom again. I watched the screen light up and dim like a heartbeat I didn't want. I didn't answer. I did, however, answer Daniel's text when it came through, because he kept it simple. You safe? You okay? I typed back, yeah, I'm okay. I love you. And I meant it. That was the only thread I allowed to stay tied. On the plane, the cabin air was dry and the lights were too bright, and I stared out the window as the city shrank under a layer of clouds. Chicago turned into blocks, then into lines, then into nothing. I didn't cry. Not because I was fine, because I'd already cried. I'd done the breaking part. This was the rebuilding part. The new city hit me with different sounds right away. Different rhythm, different pace. My first morning, I rode up in an elevator that chimed softly each time the doors opened, and the office lobby smelled like polished stone and espresso. Everyone moved like they were late, even when they weren't. My badge beeped at the security gate. That crisp little electronic sound that felt weirdly satisfying, like a door recognizing me. They handed me my employee badge on a lanyard, and there was my name, clean and centered in black letters. Claire Donovan. No fiancé, no future Mrs. Anything. Just me. The project was bigger than anything I'd handled before. Meetings stacked on my calendar like dominoes. I learned new acronyms, new expectations, new ways to be exhausted without showing it. And because I was me, because dependable boring was my secret weapon, I got trusted fast. Someone would throw a problem into a room, everybody would start panicking in polite voices, and I'd stay calm and solve it. Not because I was brave, because compared to what my family did, corporate chaos was almost funny. Within months, I was getting pulled into decisions instead of being informed about them. My responsibilities grew quietly, the way real power does. I wasn't suddenly famous. I wasn't doing victory laps. I was just necessary. And there's something about being necessary that changes the way you stand in a room. You stop shrinking without even realizing it. A year in, my title changed. More responsibility, bigger stake in outcomes. People started asking me what I thought before they moved forward. I caught myself speaking with confidence I didn't remember having, and it wasn't fake. It was earned. My life outside work changed too, but not in a flashy way. I moved into a new place that felt like mine, with big windows and a view of the skyline through the glass. At night, the city lights looked like scattered sparks, and in the morning, cold wind tapped the window like it was checking in. I got into routines that weren't about being good for anyone. Cooking actual meals, sleeping through the night, taking long walks without that buzzing anxiety that something was about to go wrong. And the quieter my life got, the louder the absence of my family felt. Not in a lonely way, in a clean way, like silence after a loud machine finally turns off. Mom still left voicemails sometimes, the same sweet pressure tone. People will ask, we need to keep it peaceful. Dad sent short commands. James stayed conveniently polite. Mia stayed publicly perfect. None of them ever said the one thing that mattered. None of them ever said, we hurt you. So I didn't chase it. I built instead. 3 years passed like that. Not all at once. Day by day. Little wins, hard weeks, small moments where I'd realize, oh, I'm okay. I'm actually okay. Better than okay. I was standing on my own feet, and no one could take that from me. Not with money, not with pressure, not with a quiet little family decision made without me. And then, on an ordinary afternoon, my phone lit up with Daniel's name, and something in my chest tightened in that familiar way, like the past was about to knock on my door. When I answered, his voice sounded careful and hopeful at the same time, and he said the words that changed the direction of everything I'd built. He was getting married, and he wanted me there. The invite didn't show up with drama. It showed up the way real life does, in layers, like the universe making sure I couldn't pretend I missed it. First, it was a thick cream envelope on my doorstep when I got home from work. The paper textured under my fingertips, like someone spent extra money on manners. When I lifted it, I caught a faint, familiar perfume on it, the kind that immediately made my shoulders tense before my brain even caught up. Then my phone pinged with an email copy of the same thing, the little whoosh sound of it arriving like it had been waiting to land. And then, late that night, my screen lit up with Daniel's name. He didn't start with small talk. He never could. He just said he was getting married, and he wanted me there. Not, it would be nice. Not, if you can. He wanted me there, and hearing it out loud made my chest do that annoying thing where it tightens and softens at the same time. I opened the invitation at my kitchen counter. The apartment smelled faintly like the tea I'd forgotten to drink, and the fridge hummed steady like it was keeping me company. The card was simple and clean, and almost painfully normal. Daniel's name printed in that formal script. The date, the venue, the line about together with their families that made me pause like, really? Families. Plural. Like mine hadn't treated me like a problem to manage. I called Daniel back because I couldn't let him sit in that anxious space alone. He answered on the first ring, voice careful like he didn't want to push too hard and lose me again. He said he understood if it was too much, if it was complicated, if I didn't want to be in a room with them. He said he just wanted to look up at his wedding and see his sister. And that was the part I couldn't refuse. Not because I missed my parents, not because I wanted closure, because Daniel had always been the one person in that family who didn't feel like a negotiation. So I told him, yeah, I'll be there. And I could actually hear him exhale, like he'd been holding his breath for 3 years. Then I added the part that wasn't a discussion. I said, I'll be there, and I'm bringing someone. The line went quiet for half a beat. Not angry quiet, just recalculating quiet. Daniel asked if I meant like a date, and I told him my +1. No name, no explanation, just the truth. My +1 was coming with me. I could tell Daniel was immediately thinking about the ripple effect. Mom's face, Dad's reaction, Mia turning it into content, James doing that polite little avoidance thing. He didn't say all of it, but I could hear it in the way his voice got careful again. He asked if I was sure, and I told him I wasn't asking permission. I was telling him so he wasn't surprised. I also told him something I didn't even realize I'd need to say until it came out. My +1 isn't there to make anyone jealous. They're not a trophy. They're not a weapon. They're just steady, kind. The type of person who doesn't talk over me, doesn't steer the room, doesn't treat my history like entertainment. The type of person who says, "Do you want to leave?" and means it, and won't make me feel guilty for choosing myself. Daniel went quiet again, and then he said, okay. Just okay. Like he was accepting the reality that he couldn't control the room, only invite people into it. After we hung up, my phone buzzed with a message from Mom almost immediately, like she'd been waiting at the edge of the conversation. She didn't say she missed me. She didn't ask how I was. She said something about keeping it peaceful, about how people will talk. Same old script, just a new occasion. I stared at the screen until it dimmed, then lit it again with my thumb, because part of me wanted to see if the words would change. They didn't. People will talk. Keep it peaceful. Like my presence was a disruption and not the consequence of what they did. I set my phone down, opened my laptop, and searched flights back to Chicago. The glow of the screen washed my hands pale, and the sound of my keys tapping felt weirdly loud in my quiet apartment. I picked a flight, filled in my information, hovered over the purchase button. My chest wasn't racing. It was steady, cold, ready. And when I finally hit confirm, the ticket popped up on my screen like a door opening. And all I could think was, the next time I walk into a room with them, it's not going to be quiet anymore. Walking into Daniel's reception felt like stepping into a room that had been paused and then forced to play again. The music was already going, some upbeat song humming under the chatter, and the air smelled like perfume, champagne, and warm food that had been sitting under lights. Glasses clinked constantly, little bright dings that normally blend into the background at weddings. But the second I crossed the doorway with my +1, the room did this weird, very human thing where it didn't go silent exactly, it just stalled. A laugh near the bar cut off mid-sound. Someone's sentence stopped in the middle like they forgot the rest of it. A fork hit a plate with a sharp little ping, and the band kept playing like nothing had happened, which somehow made it worse. I could feel eyes turning without even looking up, that ripple of attention moving table to table like cold air. I kept walking anyway. My heels made a steady tap on the floor, and my +1 stayed right beside me. Calm, not puffed up, not trying to win the room, just present. A light touch at my back for a second, then hands to themselves. Respectful, in a way that made me realize how exhausting it had been to be around people who were always trying to manage me. Daniel spotted me first. His face changed instantly, like relief and emotion hit him at the same time. He came toward me with this soft, almost disbelieving smile, and I hugged him before anyone else could insert themselves into the moment. I told him congratulations. I told him he looked good, and I meant it. He deserved a clean day.
And then I felt my family side of the room pull like gravity.
Linda appeared like she'd been waiting behind a curtain. Perfect dress, perfect hair, smile already loaded on her face. She grabbed my hands with that warm grip that's supposed to look loving to other people. "Oh my God," she said. Too bright, too loud. "It's been forever!" Her perfume hit me up close. The same kind of expensive sweetness that always made me think of public events and forced photos. Her eyes were shiny, but not in a soft way, in a tight way, like she was trying to hold a story together with her bare hands. Mia slid in right after, phone already in her hand, screen glowing. She smiled huge and glossy like she was stepping into a live stream. "Wow," she said, stretching the word. "Look who it is!" Her smile didn't reach her eyes. It never did.
It was the kind of smile you wear for the camera, even when the camera isn't technically there.
And across the room, James was exactly where I expected him to be. Near the bar, holding a drink he wasn't drinking, looking anywhere except at me. When his eyes flicked up and caught mine for half a second, he immediately looked down into his glass, like the answer to his life was sitting at the bottom of it. I didn't say anything sharp. I didn't need to. The room was already doing the work. A guest from Daniel's side, someone I didn't recognize, stepped up with a friendly grin and a champagne flute. They asked how I knew Daniel. I said I was his sister, and they lit up like, "Oh my gosh, he talks about you." And then they asked the innocent question that always sounds harmless until it isn't. "So what do you do now?" I opened my mouth, and my +1 answered first. Not in a show-off way, just politely, like they were proud of me without making it weird. "She's an executive now," they said, casual as breathing. "She led the team through an IPO, and she closed a deal that basically changed her whole division." It landed in the room like a dropped glass. Except nothing actually shattered. That was the worst part. Everything stayed intact while people's faces changed. Linda's smile froze and then wobbled. She let out this little laugh that didn't fully become a laugh, like her throat couldn't decide what emotion it was allowed to have. Her eyes went glossy again, but this time it looked like she was swallowing something sharp. Pride she couldn't claim, mixed with shock she couldn't hide. Mia's grin stayed on, but it turned stiff, like it had dried in place. Her fingers tightened around her phone so hard her knuckles went pale. She tapped her screen once, twice, pretending she was just checking something. But the phone vibrated in her hand, and she squeezed it like she could control the moment if she held it tight enough. James didn't move. He just angled his body away slightly and stared down at his drink, jaw clenched. He looked like he wanted to disappear into the bar's wooden paneling. He couldn't look at me. Not with other people watching. Not with that truth hanging in the air. A flash popped from somewhere near the dance floor. Someone taking photos by the cake, and for a second, the bright light caught all of their faces at once. The crowd's eyes. Linda's tight smile. Mia's frozen one. James's avoidance. It was like a snapshot of exactly who everyone was when they thought no one could see. I stayed calm. I said thank you to the guest. I asked them how they knew Daniel. I kept my voice even, polite, almost boring. And the irony was, that was the most brutal part. I didn't have to attack. I just had to exist in the life they never expected me to build. Then I felt it. That shift in the air that wasn't coming from the music or the champagne. From the far side of the room, my dad, Richard, had appeared. He stood there watching me like he'd been there all along, face unreadable, hands still. His eyes locked onto mine, then flicked to my +1, then back to me. Linda's hand slid onto my arm, gentle but firm, and her voice dropped into that "be nice for the audience" tone. And that's when she pulled me slightly toward the hallway and said, quietly like it was a request but it wasn't, that my father wanted to speak with me. Now. I stayed for the ceremony. Not because I was suddenly ready for some group hug family reset, and definitely not because I needed my parents to finally see me. I stayed because Daniel deserved to look up and find his sister in the room, the one person in that family who wasn't trying to turn his wedding into a negotiation. The church smelled like flowers and candle wax, that sweet, slightly dusty scent that sticks to your coat after you leave. My heels made a soft click against the aisle floor as I slid into the pew, and when Daniel exchanged rings, the gold caught the light for a second and flashed like something simple and honest, a circle placed where it was supposed to go. No conditions, no memo line. After, I stood back while people swarmed him, and I watched him grin so wide it made his cheeks hurt. He looked happy in a way that wasn't performative. That mattered to me more than anything that happened in the reception hall. My plus one stayed close, but never in front of me, never making themselves part of the story. When my phone buzzed in my bag, they didn't ask who it was or what it meant. They just leaned in and quietly asked if I wanted air. That was the whole point. Not a prop, not a statement, just peace standing next to me, like it belonged there. At one point, Linda tried to corner me again with that sweet voice that always carries a warning. People will talk. Keep it peaceful. And I looked at her, calm, and said what I needed to say without raising my voice or asking permission. I can visit, but I'm not coming back to be a shadow. Her smile twitched like the sentence didn't fit the version of me she'd rehearsed, and I didn't wait around for her to reframe it. I hugged Daniel before I left. He held on a second longer than normal, like he was trying to memorize proof that I was real. The wedding bouquet sat nearby on a table waiting to be moved, the flowers still fresh, the scent strong and sweet enough to make my throat tighten for reasons I didn't want to explain. Hours later, at the airport, the engine noise filled the cabin as the plane lined up. Runway lights stretched out in neat rows, like a path I'd chosen on purpose. I watched them blur as we sped up, and when the wheels lifted, Chicago fell away into a grid of lights that couldn't reach me anymore. I didn't leave with closure. I left with boundaries. And I'm still not sure what forgiveness looks like when someone tried to put a price on your life. If it were you, would you forgive them?